Uh, Good afternoon, all the distinguished guests that we have here, as well as my co-panelists on the desk. What I'm going to say is nothing very new. It's something which is perhaps well known. I'm going to talk about the attacks on energy infrastructure, and I've been asked to do some case studies. Now, I'll probably do just one, and if I have the time, another one, because I would like to first place whatever I have to say in the case study in the larger context, so that the audience who are not very familiar with the attacks in the energy domain get a little background picture of how and what exactly is happening. Now, energy infrastructure is being attacked for the past several decades. Past several decades there have been attacks on energy infrastructure. And it's both onshore infrastructure as well as offshore infrastructure which is being targeted. Since the 1980s, the yearly average, and I was able to work this out from one of the databases that I had access to, because there's nothing very definitive about it. There have been an average of around 250 to 300 attacks per annum on energy infrastructure, from the minor attacks, including mischief and theft, to major attacks. Now, this has been happening around a very large geographical area. And in fact, the attacks were extremely high in between 2000 and 2009. And they are all related to several factors across the globe, including the geopolitics of the globe at that point of time. Now, various violent groups and non-violent groups, and the latter I exclude because they are largely activists who work either for the environment or for other reasons, oppose offer labor and oppose and create some kind of disruptions in certain plants. But it's mostly violent groups with varied motivations who have been attacking. And I'll give you a few examples to bring out the motivations. I won't like to go into details because of time constraints. And the geographical spread, like I said, is extremely wide. It's there in Latin America, in North and West Africa, a lot of countries affected. You know, West Asia and the Middle East, the Caucasus, Russia, South and Southeast Asia. I mean, maybe this also doesn't cover all the areas, particularly in relation to attacks on the electricity grids, which we don't often come to know about unless there is an outage of a duration which affects us. So a lot of these attacks we don't really come to know about because electricity is restored quickly. The motivation behind the attacks, like I said, has been predominantly political and has become increasingly criminal. Now, I'll give you one example. The FARC is a revolutionary organization in Colombia. It's been there since the last maybe 6 or 7 decades. And it has a communist orientation. It has cadres which are around 8,000 strong. Nothing new for us in India. We have had organizations of this sort. It's been consistently attacking the Colombian energy infrastructure. In fact, its attacks are sometimes mind-boggling, the number of attacks that it can carry out, particularly on pipelines. Now, these people have been in talks with the government of Colombia since 2012. And interestingly, I was looking at the net, the attacks have not fallen. They have risen during the period of negotiations, which they are holding in Havana, in Cuba. And that is as a pressure tactic. So this is going on, and the losses are sizable. Then the same is true of rebels in Mexico, in Sudan. In Russia, you have the Chechen rebels. In Pakistan, you have the Baluchi nationalists who and others who are attacking the oil, the gas infrastructure. And India, you have the ULFA, United Liberation Front of Assam, and some Naga formations in the northeast which do it. But fortunately, nothing major has happened so far. What has actually given a spur from 2000 onwards to these attacks is the emergence of Al-Qaeda on the scene and center stage, which has resulted in more attacks taking place than usual. Now, the Al-Qaeda philosophy initially said in 1996 that the oil of the Middle East represented the wealth of the Ummah and should be protected. It was the common wealth, the common holding of the entire Ummah. But later on, they changed their perspective, especially after a couple of attacks in the Gulf of Aden on maritime assets. And then in 2004, they gave an open call for attacking oil infrastructure as a way of hurting the far enemy, that was the United States, and its near cohorts, and that is the Arab countries which were supporting and allied to the USA. So that gave a fillip. Sea piracy also has emerged. Sea piracy and maritime terrorism from the late 1990s has also emerged as a threat. Since 1997, there have been in the region of 300 plus attacks on shipping and other maritime assets annually. And a lot of these, I think from 10% upwards, are actually targeted at energy infrastructure, particularly oil tankers. Oil tankers. I have some figures for 2015. I don't think we need to go into that. So now, the conventional thinking, as reflected by Alan Greenspan and others, the economists, was this, that there was a precarious balance between supply and demand, and even the smallest act of insurrection or sabotage would have a deep impact on oil prices. Now, this appears obviously to not have happened in the context of what is happening in Iraq and Syria. Iraq being a producer of around 3.5 million barrels of oil per day. The anarchy probably in Iraq or in Syria does not appear to have affected the oil price hike. In fact, the prices are falling. So this is something which has been turned on its head, and we need to see whether the old paradigm is going to change in the long run as the Middle East becomes, all countries which were importing from the Middle East become less and less dependent on the Middle East, like the United States. Now, I said that there's been no cataclysmic attack on energy infrastructure near what happened on, say, 9/11. There's nothing been of that sort. But what has definitely happened is that a lot of small attacks, a lot of frequent small attacks have had the capacity to inflict substantial failures and costs. And I'll give you just one example. In Yemen, in 2014, there were 32 attacks on oil pipelines in the resource-rich Marif province, and 23 attacks on transmission grids in Yemen. And we all know that Yemen is in focus nowadays. And the loss was 7 million barrels in exports and around $1 billion in revenue. Now, this is the kind of losses that can occur. In Colombia, there have been 259 attacks in 2013 on pipelines, and 67 attacks in 2014. It has resulted in an 18% decline in production. Now, this just gives you an idea of what small, frequent attacks can do. Piracy itself, sea piracy, is supposed to have been taken a toll to the tune of $10 billion globally. As you all recall, a South Korean supertanker, the Samo Dream, which was hijacked sometime in 2010 in the month of April and released after 6 or 7 months of holding the tanker as well as the crew hostage, had to be retrieved by the company after paying one of the highest hostage prices, and that was $10 million for the release of one tanker. So this is one aspect which needs to be kept in mind. The other is that in some areas, piracy is directed against taking hostages, both of the crew as well as the tankers. In the other areas, say of the Gulf of Guinea, it's more theft of the product. The product is actually transferred to different tankers and taken away and then sold in the black market. So this is the kind of thing that happens. Now, what are the tactics used? They include frontal attacks with weapons and explosives, vehicle-based IEDs on targets on shore, speedboats and fishing vessels, IEDs against maritime and offshore targets. So this is the overall scenario, but one is glad to say that piracy and maritime terrorism has seen a considerable decline because of the countermeasures taken by navies around the world from 2012 onwards. There has been a substantial decline in piracy and maritime terrorism. Now I'll just discuss briefly one case study on the attack on a gas field in Algeria. And this is a celebrated attack in the negative context. It is being cited as one of those attacks which shows the vulnerability of such infrastructure to terrorist organizations. It contextualizes what needs to be done in terms of security, that even when you have security, you must have a dynamic security threat assessment system. You can't remain with the same kind of security throughout. And that dynamic threat assessment system needs to take into account not only the local environment, it needs to take into context the regional environment, and so on and so forth. And despite putting together security, you may still not be secure. You may still not be secure unless you're extremely alert to the problem at hand. And so this is therefore a somewhat well-cited case, and it also involved hostage taking of a large number of foreigners. And that is one of the contexts I told you about in which terrorists operate, and this is a source of finance for them as well. Now, the facility that I'm talking about, in the case I'm talking about, is the attack on the Amenas gas facility, which occurred in early January over 3 days in 2013 in Algeria. This facility is located over 1,000 kilometers southeast of Algiers, and it's very close to the Libyan border, just around 50 kilometers west of the Libyan border. And it's one of the most important gas fields of Algeria. And mind you, Algeria has had a lot of experience with countering fundamentalist terrorism since the 1990s. So we would presume that Algeria would be well equipped to actually counter such a threat, and it had been doing that since a long time past. Now, Algeria is not an, it's a very significant country in that part of Africa. It's the 10th largest geographically. It has a population which is 2.3 million, it has an area which is 2.3 million square kilometers and a population of 38 million. And it is the second largest, it has the second largest military and the highest, amongst the highest defense spending in North Africa. Also, it is highly dependent on hydrocarbons for sustaining its economy and revenues. So, it's not this that Algeria would not have been alive to these facts, but the weakness lay in the fact that Algeria has vast borders with Tunisia, Libya, Niger, in the east, with Mali, Mauritania, and Morocco in the west, and southwest. So these are very long borders that it has, and that is how it became somewhat vulnerable to what was happening. Now, the leader of this attack was a man called Mukhtar Bel Mukhtar, and he was recently involved in another attack in Libya, or at least he mentored another attack in Libya. He has an old Al-Qaeda affiliation, and Al-Qaeda happened to produce some experts in various fields of terrorism. Bel Mukhtar has written a little booklet, SOPs for attacking oil facilities in North Africa. Then they had another guy who is a maritime terror expert. And they had Anwar Avlaki, who was an aviation terror expert, Ilya. So, in this attack on this joint venture of Sonatrach, which is the Algerian National Oil Company, British Petroleum, and Norway's State Oil. This is a JV run by these three large companies, and in this attack, launched by an amalgam of 32 terrorists from all over the Maghreb region, the North African coastal region, on this facility, resulted in the death of 40 hostages from foreign countries and 28 terrorists of the 32 who attacked. 3 or 4, the figure is not very clear, were taken prisoners. What happened to them subsequently, I really don't know. Now, the attack occurred despite the fact that Statoil, when it joined the JV, had done a thorough assessment, a threat risk assessment of the region. BP, which has been operating around the globe, is also an expert on this kind of a thing. It had done that. They were well aware of the local Algerian situation, about the fundamentalist Islamic activities since 1990, and the emergence finally of the Al-Qaeda in that region, with these Islamic militant groups merging with the Al-Qaeda in Algeria. They were aware of that. They were also aware of the fact that there was a rebellion going on in neighboring Mali by the Tuareg tribal community, which has been agitating for an independent area in that area of Mali for a very long period of time, and that agitation had been hijacked by Islamist elements. Also, some related to Al-Qaeda who had left the Al-Qaeda for various reasons, and that also had an impact on this. So there were a lot of factors playing into this attack, and finally the fact that Mukhtar Bel Mukhtar himself was being looked down upon by the Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, that area of which he was a part, and being told that you've done nothing. You've done nothing, you have all the assets, military assets, but you really carried out no real attack. And also the fact that in Mali, the French had intervened in January 2013 and were on the verge of pushing back the Mujah, as the Alliance of Islamists was called. They were on the verge of doing that. So in the intervening period, Mukhtar attacked this gas facility and easily took hold of it. There was a macabre 3 days there with all the things that you see in films. I mean, really gory stuff going on. Hostages being taken, people trying to escape, hostages being trying to put into one particular area. And this despite the fact that the military had declared a military zone around the facility. And these terrorists were able to penetrate both on foot and in vehicles across the desert sands where they should have been visible, very easily visible. So there was no intelligence. The security apparatus deployed failed to intervene and interdict. Failed to intervene and interdict. And thirdly, when they did carry out an a hostage release operation, they did all the wrong things. They attacked 6 vehicles which the terrorists were using to bunch the hostages in one place and then probably carry them across the border for ransom. The military, the Air Force, in gunships, attacked them from the air, set 4 vehicles on fire. 2 vehicles were bullet-ridden. Around 28 to 30 hostages, all foreigners, died in that attack. And in the subsequent explosion, when the ground forces, the Algerian ground forces, actually entered the complex. So, I basically reiterate my earlier points that it's not only having the security. Mind you, the JV there also had its inner security system, the kind of system security that we talk about. They had that. They had access control. They had PIDS, and everything was there. Everything was there. But there was no liaison between the JV and the military. The military tactics were not known. The military doctrine of how to counter this kind of hostage situation was not known. How they accessed, probably from Libya, in vehicles or from Mali, was not very clear. So, resulted in a terrible disaster. And the lessons are what I said in the earlier, you have to have a dynamic risk management methodology. The senior management had left the entire thing to their liaison department and not associated themselves with the inner security issues or with the liaison issues. And this is the fact, this is why this terrible attack took place and the terrible tragedy that followed. And I do feel, my personal feeling is that you can protect plants, you need to protect plants, but it's actually good intelligence and good ground police work that has to be the first and second line of defense. The third line of defense is critical infrastructure protection with all its attributes. So that has to be done. The other lesson for foreign companies is that when you go into countries like this, you must, in your security dialogue with them, embed the exchange of security issues as a part of the production sharing agreement. You must have that in that. On how you're going to work your way through security, how you would liaison with the national agencies, because in every country the security agencies, especially the intelligence agencies, are quite averse to directly sort of liaisoning with foreign companies or their employees. So all this should be laid down in crystal clear letters, and a whole system of evaluation periodically needs to be worked out. I can go on, I have several other studies of this sort, but I think there are time constraints here. Thank you very much.